The deadliest job in the air war demanded you fit inside a 3.5-foot metal sphere, clutch two .50 caliber Browning machine guns, and hold your life at the mercy of a design flaw so profound it made wearing a parachute physically impossible. Crews accepted a 62% fatality rate, knowing bailouts meant precious seconds they did not have. But why would engineers trap gunners with no escape? And what really happened when disaster struck? The ball turret was a marvel of compact engineering, an armored glass sphere barely 3.5 feet across, mounted entirely outside the bomber's belly. Its shape was dictated by necessity, a perfect globe just large enough to house a single gunner and his weapons, but small enough to swing freely beneath the fuselage at 25,000 feet. Two .50 caliber Browning machine guns jutted forward, their barrels protruding from the glass, while ammunition feeds snaked from boxes above. The gun sight hung between the operator's knees, and hand grips, triggers, and foot pedals crowded the remaining space. Every inch of the turret's interior was spoken for. Inside, there was no seat, just a thin pad and a harness. The gunner curled into a fetal position, back pressed against the cold steel of the rear wall, knees drawn up, feet braced on narrow stirrups. The turret's hatch, a small oval barely 17 inches wide, doubled as the only way in or out. The sphere's armor was thin, designed to keep weight down, offering little beyond a sense of enclosure. Only the smallest crewmen were assigned here, men under 5'6" and weighing less than 150 pounds. For them, the ball turret was less a cockpit and more a shell, barely larger than a washing machine. Suspended in the slipstream, armed with enough firepower to defend the bomber's most vulnerable point, the geometry left no margin. Every control, every cable, every bullet had its place inside a space just wide enough for a man and his guns, nothing more. 8 hours folded into a steel sphere left no room for comfort or error. The gunner's world shrank to a fetal curl, every joint pressed tight against the turret's cold interior. His back arched, knees drawn toward the chest, feet braced on narrow stirrups just inches from the spinning gun sight. He had to hold this position from takeoff to landing. The only way to see or to aim was to peer between his knees, hands gripping controls above his shoulders, toes nudging pedals to swing the turret. Each movement was measured, every muscle locked in place by the hard shell and the machinery crowding every surface. The cramped posture was just the start. Ammunition boxes, wedged into the tightest corners, fed the twin .50 caliber guns through metal chutes that snaked around the gunner's body. Each box held enough rounds for only 30 seconds of continuous fire. Gunners learned to count their bursts, 2 seconds, maybe 3, knowing that a long squeeze of the trigger could leave them helpless when it mattered most. Flight manuals drilled the lesson. Shoot in short, controlled bursts. Conserve every round, because reloading meant signaling for help and waiting, locked in place while another crewman crawled over to swap out the empty boxes. There was no spare inch for anything extra. The turret's glass, armor, and mechanical guts filled every gap, leaving the gunner pressed so close to the walls that even a thick flight suit felt like a luxury. The geometry of the ball turret dictated not just how the gunner sat, but what he could bring with him and what he had to leave behind. A standard military parachute pack in World War II measured about 20 inches tall, 17 inches wide, and 6 inches thick, nearly the size of a small suitcase. Inside the ball turret, there was no possible way to fit such a pack along with a man, his heated flight suit, and the machinery that filled every inch of the sphere. The gunner's back pressed flush against the turret's rear armor, with only a thin pad for insulation. Even the smallest bulge would block movement, jam the controls, or prevent the hatch from closing. Technical Order 1318 made it clear: no back-mounted parachutes were allowed inside the turret. Instead, the parachute was left outside, stowed on a rack just above the turret hatch in the bomber's fuselage. This meant that in an emergency, the gunner faced a precise and unforgiving sequence. First, he had to rotate the turret until its hatch aligned with the aircraft interior. Next, he released the locking mechanism and squeezed through the narrow opening, 17 inches at its widest point. Only then could he reach for his parachute, clip it to his harness, and crawl toward an exit hatch. Each step cost precious seconds. If the bomber was hit, on fire, or spinning out of control, Those seconds could mean the difference between life and death. The process was not just awkward, it was a race against disaster with no margin for error and no backup plan if the path was blocked. For the ball turret gunner, survival came down to timing, luck, and the hope that the next emergency would allow enough time to escape. Improvisation became a matter of survival. Some gunners, unnerved by close calls, tried to squeeze chest-mounted parachutes into the turret, hoping a smaller pack might be manageable where the standard issue was not. The chest chute was lighter and less bulky, but even then, the harness could not be properly attached inside the cramped sphere. Flight surgeon logs and oral histories describe these attempts as desperate, rarely effective, and never officially approved. If a parachute was brought inside, it could crowd the controls or jam the hatch, risking entrapment instead of escape. Physical hardship went far beyond the question of parachutes. At operational altitudes, the temperature inside the ball turret could plunge to -50 degrees Fahrenheit. Heated flight suits and boots were issued, but power failures or damaged wiring left many gunners exposed to the full force of the cold. Frostbite and numbness were common. Some men finished missions with fingers too stiff to unclasp their harness or work the turret's controls. 8 hours in a fetal position, pressed against steel, left muscles cramped and circulation impaired. Medical records note cases of permanent nerve damage, especially in the lower back and legs. Oxygen starvation was a constant risk. At 25,000 feet, the thin air made every breath a struggle. If the oxygen line kinked or the supply faltered, the gunner could lose consciousness in minutes. The rest of the crew would only notice if the turret stopped moving. Each mission brought a new tally of bruises, frostbitten skin, and aching joints. The toll was cumulative, and the knowledge that escape might be impossible weighed on every man who climbed into the ball. A veteran's memory, recorded decades after the war, captures the terror that lived in every turret. His B-17 took a direct hit over Germany and pitched into a steep, uncontrolled dive. The intercom crackled with the pilot's voice ordering the crew to bail out now. He twisted the turret to the exit position and managed to unlatch the hatch. But as he reached up, the G-forces tore his parachute loose. It slid away, sucked down the length of the fuselage toward the tail, out of reach. Seconds ticked by as the bomber screamed earthward. There was no way to crawl out, no hope of retrieving the parachute. Only when the pilot pulled the plane out of its dive did the gunner realize he was still alive, trapped in the sphere with nothing between him and open sky, but glass and luck. For many, that luck ran out before the plane ever found level flight. Landing gear failure turned the ball turret into a death sentence. When a B-17 or B-24 could not lower its wheels, the only option was a belly landing, sliding the bomber across the ground, metal scraping, sparks flying. The turret, hanging low beneath the fuselage, offered no protection. If the gunner was still inside, he would be crushed between the earth and the aircraft's steel belly. In those moments, the crew's only hope was the manual crank, a hand-turned mechanism meant to rotate the turret to its exit position. But battle damage often jammed the gears, leaving the gunner trapped. Pilots circled the airfield, burning fuel and buying time, while waste gunners fought the crank, knuckles raw, desperate to free their friend before the bomber ran out of sky. Sometimes they made it, sometimes time ran out. Aircraft design still weighs human risk against technological limits. Today, engineers face new pressures, and history proves every overlooked flaw costs real lives. Remembering these stories is not nostalgia, it is a warning. The next life or death decision could be built into tomorrow's machines. Share your thoughts below.